Hi guys, I hope that you all doing well, and today I'm going to make a tutorial on very famous JavaScript framework, that is AngularJS. And with AngularJS I'm going to validate form. As you can see on my screen, this is the form that I'm going to design from the start and write its HTML and CSS so that you may learn how to design this form as well. It will not take too much time, but I will do it. Alright, I have already made a tutorial on jQuery, and in which I have showed you how to validate form by giving an example of validating password fields. Alright, if you want to see how to validate form with jQuery, you can check out the playlist in my channel JavaScript and jQuery, and there are a bunch of other project based tutorials on jQuery, so you can check that out. Alright, so this is the form. Let me do it. So you can see that there is a black, there is a blue border, and let me add it. And if I hover it and then leave it, you can see that there is an error. Alright, and when there is an error, we can't submit this form. Alright, so let's add it. Let's add password fields. Password field have to be at least 6. Alright, so phone number should be in numbers. Now if I click on it, you will see that there will be a message, welcome Umair, you have signed in, and there this is the username that I have just added my own name. Alright, so this is the form. It is very important to learn AngularJS because it helps a lot in validating form. It will take a lot of time if we validate form with JavaScript or jQuery, but it takes less time using AngularJS to validate form. So let's start. The IDE I'm using is WebStorm, but you can use other IDEs as well, like Notepad++, Sublime Text, etc. Alright, so I've just created new project, empty project. Alright, and this is an empty project, so let's create some files in order to write some HTML and CSS. Okay, so right click on it, new, and create an HTML file, and I will name it as index.html. Alright, now go and create some style.css. Alright, and before writing HTML, let's write some CSS code inside it. Alright, so I'm not going to explain it because I hope that you already know how to write it. Okay, so there will be a container. It has to be display block, background has to be F4, F4, F4. Okay, a lighter gray, and its max width should be 850 pixels. Margin top should be 20 pixels. Margin left auto. Margin right should be auto as well. Padding 10 pixels and 40 pixels from the top and bottom. So text align has to be center. Everything that it contains has to be at center. Okay, position has to be relative. Font family, font size 15 pixels. Alright, now let's go, and there will be a heading tag. As you can see that this form validation, and there will be a message. We need to write some CSS for this as well. So now let's go and first add a class text intro, font size 40, and make sure you do it in your own system as well so that you may also learn how to write it. Okay, so that has to be 100%. Margin bottom has to be 20 pixels. Padding top has to be 10 pixels. Font weight has to be 700. Font family has to be sans serif, and we need to add color, and that has to be 555 459. Okay, that is a dark gray color. And now we need to add some margin top, and that should be 20 pixels. Margin bottom, that should be 20 pixels as well. Actually, I have already added margin bottom. Okay, so let's remove the above one. Now I need to add the style for this one. Okay, so let's go and text intro paragraph, font style normal. Alright, now let's add for the input fields, width has to be 100%, display inline block, font weight 100, padding 15 pixels. You can also pause the video if you want to carry on with me and write it by your own in your system. You can pause and write it down and then resume it again. Okay, so margin 5 pixels 0, font size 1 REM, font weight has to be, okay, I have already added what left in it. Yeah, I need to add some color for the text. Okay, so that has to be 3F darker gray color. And now we need to write the style for this button. Okay, let's add a class for button, and it's display inline block, padding has to be 12 pixels and 24 pixels, margin bottom has to be 0, font size 1.4 REM. Okay, and text align, center, vertical align, middle, cursor has to be pointer, and color has to be a lighter gray, so I will write F5 F5 F5. Okay, so min width has to be 26 pixels, and min height has to be 26 pixels. Its background color should be 555 459. Okay, so now what is left, we have added style for this, we have added style for input and the button. Alright, and we need to add a style for the error. Okay, so now let's go and add a class error, margin top 0 pixels, and color has to be red. Alright, so that's all CSS that we need for our HTML. Now let's go and write some HTML. Alright, so uh, let's add some title. So I will write Angular form validation, and I will add a reference to my CSS file so that all the styles may apply on the elements that I'm going to write in this index file. So href, and that has to be style. Alright, so that's all in header. Now let's come inside body, and I will write div class, and that has to be container. Alright, and inside it I need another div for this heading and this message. So it will have a div class, and that has to be a class of text intro. Alright, and inside it I need h1 form validation and p tag. Alright, I'm not gonna fill it because I'm going to fill it with my Angular model. Okay, so come out from this div. Now let's create form for our validation. Name of this form would be my form. Okay, and inside it I need to add some input elements. So type equals to text. This has to be the first name. Its name should be first name. Alright, and placeholder should be first name. Alright, now let's come under it and add a paragraph tag for the error message. Alright, and we need to show if this value is invalid. Alright, and we need to add a check on it that this paragraph element shouldn't be shown when this first name is added wrong. Okay, so let's add a message, fill out your first name. Alright, and add a class for it that has to be error. Okay, now I need 5 input elements and 5 paragraph for error message shown for individual input elements. So I'm going to copy it, paste it 4 more times. I'm going to change its name from first name to last name, last name, last name. Alright, and then I have email. Okay, so type would be email, and this would be email again. Okay, and this has to be email. Enter your correct email. Alright, and after that I have password. Okay, so I will change its type password, and its name has to be password as well, and placeholder password. Okay, and its error message should be password should be at least 6 characters long. Alright, so we are going good up till now. Now let's change the last one to phone number. Let's change the type to number. It will not allow users to enter anything, any character from the keyboard other than number. Okay, it will just accept numeric characters. So that has to be phone. Placeholder has to be phone number. Okay, and it has to be phone number. Let's remove name. Okay, so I think we are done with our CSS and HTML. Now let's check out if the layout is fine. Alright guys, so you can see that our layout is working perfectly. We haven't added our Angular code yet, so everything is being shown. Okay, we need to check if this value or this value is correct, and if this is correct, then hide this message, otherwise show it. Alright, and now we have one thing left. We need to add a button for it. Okay, at the bottom. So let's add the button. Come under it and add a button element, and it has to be type submit, and class has to be, I think, button. It was button. Okay, and its text should be submit. Now reload it. You can see that button is being shown. Alright, so far so good. Now let's go and write some AngularJS in order to validate this form. So it's going to be very interesting, and it's going to be so easy and so interesting to learn. Alright, so let's do it. Now I'm going to right click it and create a JavaScript file, and I'm going to name it app.js. Alright, before writing anything inside it, I'm going to add a reference for my Angular file. Before actually starting code, I want to show you that how to work with Angular. We need to download Angular file from the official Angular site. What you need to do, you need to go to a search engine and write AngularJS CDN and click on first link. Alright, and from the first link you need to copy this whole link from here. Alright, and come right here and add a script tag. Its type should be text JavaScript, and source should be that file. Okay, that's an online file. It will not work if you don't have internet connection. Alright, you can also download this file, this angular-min.js, and save it inside your project and add a reference to that project. Alright, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to add a reference to the online directory that contains this file. Okay, now I'm going to add a reference to my app file in which I'm going to write my own Angular. Okay, and then make sure you add a reference for actual Angular file before your JavaScript file, because the Angular file should be load first in order to run Angular inside your app.js. Okay, this Angular file. Okay, so now let's go and make sure you press F12 to activate the developer mode in order to see if there aren't any errors. So there are no errors, so it means that our Angular file and our JavaScript file is being loaded correctly. Alright, so the thing is that I can also validate form without writing anything on it, but I want to show you that how to assign a controller or a model and add values inside the scope using this Angular. Alright, so now let's go and create a module. So every Angular application start with a module, and we need to write module, okay, and name the module, and I'm going to name it my app. Alright, and I have the reference of this my app module, and using this module I can create controllers, I can create factories, I can create services, I can create directives and much more things. So now in this application I just need a controller. So my app dot controller, and I'm going to name controller form controller. Alright, and after that I need to add a scope. So that has to be a scope that we're gonna use inside our function. Alright, now inside this controller we are going to define our variables that we can bind with our elements. Alright, so right now in this code we are just going to write a variable for the message shown that welcome, you have signed in. Okay, and for that we need to press this button, and when this button is pressed, uh, the function that we are going to write will be called, and that value will be bind to this element. Okay, now let's go and write a function. Everything a function or a variable or an object, array or a JSON file has to be inside a variable starting with scope dot. Okay, so this has to be a function. Okay, and inside this function we need to define our variable message, and that has to be welcome, and that has to be scope dot user dot first name, you have signed in. Okay, so it will fetch the value that we will write in our first input element, and it will concatenate that value with the welcome and you have signed in string. Alright, so we have a message and register. Now let's go into HTML and bind those variables with these elements. Okay, first of all I need to bind that thing with our message. So in order to bind this variable with this element we need to use double curly braces. Alright, and now it will show that this element has access to each and every variable that we have defined inside this controller. Alright, so I will write MSG. Alright, so the question is that how does it know that it belongs to this controller? Alright, we need to assign this controller to this particular block. So in order to assign this controller we need to first assign a module. Okay, and in order to assign a module we need to write ng-app, and our module name is my app. This is our module name. Alright, and now we need to add controller, ng controller. Alright, so form controller, make sure you have spelled it well. So I'm going to copy and paste it. So you can see that we have added a reference for our module and for our controller inside this element. Now everything that is defined inside this controller is being able to bind with each and every element that is inside this div. Now come inside my form and we need to bind each and every input element with a module. Alright, we can also define our model inside this controller, but I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna show you that how to define variables, how to define functions and add that variables inside the scope. Alright, so now let's come inside it and write ng model equals to user dot first name. Alright, ng model is a directive, Angular directive that will create a model itself. Alright, so you can see that I have used scope.user.firstName. Alright, this variable and this variable are the same. It is already binded with each other. Alright, so we don't need to bind explicitly that this is this. So now let's write another ng directive ng required equals to true. This means that this value has to be written. This shouldn't be kept empty. Alright, so far so good. Now let's come inside it. Let's do it later on. I'm not gonna do the error thing right now, so let's copy it and paste it. So user dot last name and ng required true, and come inside email, user dot email and ng required true. Okay, so now let's come under it and that has to be user dot password. Alright, you can think of it as a class that we have named a user, and these are the attributes of those class. Alright, right now we have a class and it has I think 6 attributes. This is also included in that scope and this is also included in that scope. Alright, so now let's come inside it and I need another thing right here, ng, and that has to be min length. Okay, that has to be 6. Okay, if the length of this password that user will enter is less than 6, then we need to show this error. Alright, now let's come and that has to be phone and user required. Alright, now how we can show this error if any of these value gets false. Alright, now let's come and add a directive ng show. This is a conditional directive. It has to be given Boolean value, true or false. If the value is true, then this message will be shown. If the value is false, then this value will be hidden. Alright, so this value has to be shown when this value user.firstName is invalid. Alright, so there are some keywords that we can use inside Angular. Alright, that's a part of JavaScript. So we can check it if my form dot first name dot invalid. So let's write it, my form dot first name dot invalid. That has to be start with invalid. Okay, if this value that has the name, this first name belongs to this attribute. Alright, if this is false, Alright, then this will return a false value, okay, and this message will be shown. Now let's copy it and paste it as well. I'm going to change these values later on. Let's paste it in every error message. Alright, so now let's go and copy and paste the name inside it. Alright, now let's go and check it out first if it works or not. Alright, so you can see that these are being shown. Alright, now this is gone. Alright, we need to also check these messages shouldn't be shown at start. When we start our application, these messages should be hidden. So we can check if any of these input elements are being active, means that we have clicked on it and we have left it without entering any value. Alright, then show this message. Otherwise, don't show this message at the start of this application. Now let's go and add another condition inside it, that my form dot first name dot, and there is another built-in value that is touched. Alright, and if the input element is touched, then show this message if both the conditions are true. Alright, now let's copy it and paste it in other elements as well. So my form first name touched, and I'm going to write it as well, and I'm going to write it as well, and write here as well. Alright, and I'm going to change the names, email, phone. Alright, now let's go and run it again. There is something going wrong in it. Alright, well, there is an error that we need to remove this double quotes and end it right here. Alright, so let's add double quotes. The whole value should be inside ng show. Alright, let's remove these double quotes. Alright, so I think that was an error, so let's go and reload it. You can see that those errors are gone, and if I touch it and leave it without any value, you can see that there is an error message. Alright, if I write my name, error message is gone. If I touch it and leave it, and it's gone. Alright, if I touch and leave and leave and leave, you can see that there are appropriate messages on each. If I enter wrong email, this message will be shown because the type of that input element is email. Now let's write an actual email. Let's add a format. Password has to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and number, it will not allow me to enter any other character other than numbers, so I will write numbers. Alright, so far so good, and these are working fine. We need to resolve some issues of those message that you have logged in, and we need to add a click event for this button. Alright, so this has to be enabled if everything is fine. If there is no error, if there is an error, then this button should be disabled. So now go, let's do it. First of all, I'm going to resolve this thing, and this message has to be shown when message variable exists. Alright, so how we can make this variable exist inside the scope? We need to call this register method. Let's change it to register. Alright, so now if the button is clicked, okay, then what we need to do? Actually, we don't need to add a click event because it is already a button. If we have to be added this input element and add its type to button, then that has to be a click event. Now we don't need to add a click event. What we can do is we can add a click event to this, but not the click event but the submit event. Means if this form is submitted, means that if this button is clicked, because its type is submit. Alright, so there is an Angular directive called ng submit. Alright, and it should call this function with the brackets. Alright, but we need to disable this button when there are some errors. So how we can disable it? Alright, again we can use this directive. There are a bunch of directives. If you go to Angular documentation, you will see that there will be a lot of directives. So there is a directive called ng disabled. It will receive a Boolean value. Alright, so what we need to do, we need to write my form dot invalid. So when our form will be invalid. Alright, so you can see that form contains all these input elements. Form element is the parent. So whenever any of these values are invalid, alright, the form will return true. Alright, so when it will return true, this disabled will be true and it will disable this button. It will not hide it, but it will disable it. Alright, so far so good. Now let's go and reload it. I think that we are done. And one thing that I want to show you, that if I reload it, you can see that it is blinking. It is showing all the messages and it's gone again. I'm going to show you that what is the reason behind it, and I'm going to resolve it. First I want to show you if it is working fine. So you can see that I need to write my name and this thing. Alright, so you can see that there are error message. If I click on it, you can see that it is not triggering that function. I need to write all these elements. So ABC, I just need to follow the format of email. I need to add a password and add a number. Alright, I have forgotten to add a color to it if it is enabled. So if I click on it, you can see that there is a message. It wasn't showing before because the message variable wasn't existing. It was only existing when this register function triggered. Alright, so guys, it's working fine. Now let's go and see what is the error behind it, why it's just showing and then just hiding each and everything. The reason is that our HTML is being loaded first and our Angular and this app.js file is being loaded later on. What we need to do, we need to cut it and paste it inside head element. Alright, what it will do is it will load first and after that our HTML will be loaded. Alright, so if Angular file is loaded first, all these directives will be understandable to the browser. Alright, now if I reload it, you can see that it's working pretty well. So guys, this was all for this tutorial. I hope that you have learned a lot and it is very interesting. You can see that I don't have to write a lot of code. There are a lot of directives available inside Angular that we can use in order to validate our form, and we don't need to write a lot of code. If we were to write code in JavaScript or jQuery, we had to write a lot of code in order to validate this form. I hope that you have learn a lot from this tutorial. Make sure to subscribe this channel, comment below if you have any question, and thumbs up. See you in the next video.